They decided that leaving was planned until Lily was fairly confident that they were on their way back down the hill. When they finally got down to the bottom and saw the old wooden fence that surrounded the original parking area, they were relieved. But as they got closer, they saw it. The truck was parked on the other side of the Gravely makeshift lot, just sitting there facing the other way innocently. They couldn't see if anyone was in it, and of course Macy wanted to run for the car, but Lily was super hesitant. This took place when there were no cell phones and there was no ranger station or anyone around. The parking lot was big and empty and open, and who knows what would have happened if they decided to stroll across it. Thankfully, Lily convinced Macy to relax, and the two hunkered down against a big tree, hidden in the bushes, waited it out. Not big time, but big enough to get free stuff, and has gotten 2 sponsored trips. One day, a boutique hotel from Miami contacted her via Instagram DMs and offered her an all-expenses-paid trip to Miami for Memorial Weekend, in exchange for her to be in a hotel and take pics and do a couple of stories. She was told she could bring a female friend with her if she wanted to, and everything would be covered for. This was her first time doing this, so at the time, she wasn't really sure of how it worked. The company sent her a contract for her to sign, and it said she'd be responsible for paying for her plane ticket to Miami, and that she would be reimbursed for it later. This was to prevent a no-show, meaning the influencer gets the ticket purchased by the hotel and the influencer never shows up, so it seemed reasonable. She invited Harry instead of a female friend because she was nervous about the whole thing, and they figured it wouldn't be a big deal. Worst case scenario, they don't pay for Harry's plane ticket, but they can cover it for themselves. Mari did, and then escorted to a black SUV. Here is where it gets weird. As soon as they got into the car, they noticed that the driver is visibly upset. Harry and Mari thought he was talking to the guy who walked them over, but he was talking to Mari. He had a very thick accent and was wearing dark shades. He was telling Mari that she was not allowed to bring her boyfriend, and that she said it was 2 girls. 2 girls. Hotel told me 2 girls. No 1 guy, 1 girl, 2 girls. He was demanding to see where the other girl was. They were speechless and confused. The guy who walked them to the car looked annoyed. He got into the passenger seat and started to fight with the driver in Portuguese. Then he turns to them and asks where the other girl is at. Mari, feeling very upset by now, tells them that there is no other girl, that she is Mari and Harry is just a friend coming with her on a trip. The guy in the driver's seat gets out, tosses their luggage out of the car and says, "This is some bullshit." He gets in the car and immediately they take off. That was it. Harry and Mari were in complete shock. She immediately emails Melissa, the PR person they have been in contact with this entire time, to tell her what happened. No response. They decided to take a cab and show up to the hotel. And when they finally got there, everything made sense. The hotel had been rebranded and had a completely different name, owner, and staff. Harry showed them the hotel's Instagram profile, and indeed, that was the hotel it used to be, but not the new one. This hotel never contacted them. They never did anything. Whoever was in charge of the old IG account of the old hotel did, or whoever got a hold of it did. And mind you, this was a somewhat big hotel account with over 10,000 followers. It was real, but upon further inspection, Harry and Mari realized that the pictures were really old, and so were the posts. Mari felt like an idiot and couldn't believe that they actually got into this situation. They called the police, met up with the detective, but nothing ever came out of it. They investigated who was running the account before or who had access to it. However, none of the people who used to run the account had anything to do with it. Nothing ever came out of this. When Ray was 11 years old, her parents had to go to an emergency trip to her grandparents' house, but she had school and basketball practice in the mornings, so she couldn't go. Their house alarm was broken, so Ray's dad told her where his hidden pistol was and made sure she knew to call 911 if something were to occur and to immediately
Have fun? I guess so. Thanks.
started getting annoyed thinking that it was the neighborhood stoner kids just messing around in the middle of the night, which they were known for doing so she got out of bed and went outside the room. Her bedroom door has a loud pop to it when opened, louder than the front door, and it can be heard throughout the entire house. Suddenly, the clinking noises stopped, but Ray still felt the need to check it out. There were high shrubs outside her bedroom window, so she couldn't really see outside very well. She went out to the living room and peered through the blinds and jumped up when she noticed the hooded figure peek over from the side of the entrance. Someone was trying to pick the lock and break into her house. Ray's mind was racing. He had to have noticed the blinds move, but maybe he ran off. Ray held her breath for a moment and stayed completely still. Not even a minute later, the clinking returned, but more furiously. This psycho was still trying to break in. In her panic state, she didn't think about calling the police or her dad. A sudden rage came over Ray, and she just wanted to get rid of this guy. She grabbed a can of hairspray in her bathroom, and because of Ray's love for candles, Ray had a lighter in her room as well. She raced back to the door and in one swift motion, unlocked it, yanking it open, and lit that burglar up while screaming at the top of her lungs. She couldn't see the guy well in the darkness and past the flames, but Ray heard a loud scream of anguish. It didn't take long for the neighbors to hear her and turn on their porch lights, which is when she suddenly collected herself and let go of the lighter switch. But when she opened her eyes, there was no one there. The guy quickly ran out of there, and Ray's neighbors had come outside in the light panic and called the police. Her parents were also called, and she explained to them and the police what had happened. But unfortunately, because it was so dark, she couldn't identify him. Ray's mom was freaking out about it, but her dad said he was proud and told her to get some sleep after everything. But that was impossible. She stayed up the entire night thinking about it. The next day, Ray got a call from her parents saying that the officers had caught the guy. A patrol car had noticed someone smoking in the nearby park under the playground, and the officers approached the suspect. Assuming it was one of the stoner kids, they expected him to run. But to their surprise, he approached them and was begging for help. They saw that his entire arm was burnt to a crisp, and when they searched his backpack, they found enough evidence to arrest the guy. And thankfully, he never returned.
See you tomorrow.
In the late 1960s, my great-uncle John was traveling by train from his village to another to visit family.
I guess it's time to go home, go to bed, wake up in the morning, go to school. The time 5 AM, nice. Let's get to school, I guess.
He had to change trains at one point and was dropped off at what amounted to a platform in a hut in the middle of nowhere. There was no one at the station, and other than a dirt road that led off into the surrounding wood.
Let me film this shit. Am I too late? God damn it. It's too late, god damn it. School starts at 8, so everyone will be here at 8.
There was nothing there. He waited for some time, but no train came. It was winter and getting colder and darker, and just about the time he started worrying about a place to stay and some food to eat, an old woman appeared out of the twilight. She asked if he was waiting for a train, and when he said he was, she said it wouldn't be long until the following day. She asked if he needed a bed for the night and offered him a meal and a room at her house. He was glad to accept her offer and stay out of the cold. He took his suitcase and they set off together down the dark road into the forest. It was more than an hour away, and by the time they arrived at the woman's small 2-story house, John was tired and as a 23-year-old student that wasn't comfortable with living with any males. The other roommate would have their own room and attached bathroom. So far, Amanda was into this place. However, the listing only had a single photo from outside the property. Amanda sent an email wanting to meet the occupant and tour the house. Within 30 minutes, she receives an email back with all the details and time to stop by. The girl worked late hours and wanted Amanda to stop by at 8 p.m. When Amanda arrives, there's a handwritten note on the front door saying, "Door broken. Use back door." Walking around the house, it looks nice but slightly unkempt. Tall grass, weeds, dusty windows, etc. When she knocks on the back door, an older man opens it. At first, Amanda thinks she has the wrong house, but the man reassures her and says the occupant was out and he was the landlord. The occupant asked him to meet Amanda since she was working late. Alarms start going off, but aren't at red alert yet. First, the guy was clearly in his 40s, unshaven, and looked like he lived in his car. Also, only the kitchen light was on. As they walked around the house, Amanda noticed one huge red flag. No furniture. Nothing. The landlord was polite about answering questions, but seemed irritable to keeping lights on for too long, rushing her around and only letting her look at rooms for a few moments. There was a single room that the landlord wouldn't open, telling her that it was the occupant's room and he didn't want to invade her privacy. As they walk down the hallway, she notices the front door has a plank nailed across it, broken for sure. Amanda's creep meter is starting to ding, so she decides to wrap up the house tour and leave, but tries to be polite. He perks up and states that he forgot to show her the basement. It's recently furnished and would be a great recreation room. So he opens it. The basement is pitch black. He smiles, motions down the stairs, and says, "Ladies first." What happens next is nothing more than a stroke of luck. Amanda gets a text just as some random person parks in front of the house. Thinking on her feet, she pretends it's a phone call and answers her phone. "Hey, yeah, are you here? I'll come out from around back and let you in." It's great, you have to see it. With a motion of confidence, she excuses herself around the landlord and walks out the back door. The guy just looked at her and he was confused. Once outside, she quickly sprinted to her car and sped out of there. When Amanda got home, she told her mother and my brother everything. Cops were called, they took her statement and went to investigate. The Craigslist post had been removed. The house had been foreclosed over 6 months earlier and the property had been abandoned. When the police investigated, they found that the closed room the landlord didn't want her to look in was where the man had been staying. There was a pile of old dirty blankets, rotten food, and empty gallon jugs everywhere. The more creepy thing was he had plastered ripped up pages from provocative magazines on all the walls in the room. And the scariest part of this was the basement. The man had tied a piece of fishing twine at about shin level across the stairs about halfway down. The basement was empty except another old pile of blankets, a broom handle wrapped in leather belts, and a small box with a few rows of assorted tapes. Needless to say, Amanda never ended up moving in, and she hopes she never meets that man ever again. About 5 years ago, I lived downtown in a major city in the US. I've always been a night person, so I would often find myself bored after my roommate went to sleep. To pass the time, I used to go for long walks and spent the time thinking. The park, as it was most nights, was completely empty. I turned down a short side street in order to loop back to my apartment when I first noticed him. At the far end of the street on my side was the silhouette of a man dancing. It was a strange dance, similar to a waltz. Deciding he was probably drunk, I stepped as close as I could to the road to give him the majority of the sidewalk to pass me by. He was very tall and lanky and wearing an old suit. He danced closer until I could make out his face. His eyes were open and wild, head tilted back, looking off at the sky. His mouth was formed in a painfully wide cartoon of a smile. I decided to cross the street before he could get any closer. As I reached the other side, I glanced back and then stopped dead in my tracks. He had stopped dancing and was standing with one foot in the street, perfectly parallel to me. He was facing me, but still looking skyward, smile still wide on his lips. I was completely and utterly unnerved by this. I started walking again. He didn't move. The street and sidewalk ahead were completely empty. Still unnerved, I looked back to where he had been standing to find him gone. For the briefest of moments, I felt relieved until I noticed him. He had crossed the street and was now slightly crouched down. I couldn't tell for sure due to the distance and the shadows, but I was certain he was facing me. I was so shocked that I stood there for some time, staring at him. And then he started moving towards me again. He took giant, exaggerated, tiptoed steps as if he were a cartoon character sneaking up on someone. I like to say at this point I ran away or pulled out my pepper spray or my cell phone or anything at all. But I didn't. I just stood there.
The fuck is that? Seriously? This car catch on fire? I don't know how. It like explode or something? Shit! Oh hell no! It's like explode or something. There's a dead body in there. Poor guy. Knock it the fuck out, bitch.
Right now, ma'am. I'm about to knock a patch out of your ass.
What?
And crept towards me, still smiling, still looking at the sky. When I finally found my voice, I blurted out the first thing that came to mind. What I meant to say was, "Hey, what do you want?" What came out was a whimper.
I guess so.
What do you... Regardless
You
of
can
whether
sleep
or
on
not
the ground.
humans
No,
can
my
smell
dad
fear,
sleep on the
they can
ground.
certainly
You can
hear
sleep
it.
in
I heard it in
this
my own
barrel
voice, and that only made me more
or
afraid. But he didn't
moan.
react to it at all. He just stood
barrel.
there,
Okay, cool.
smiling. And then, after what felt like forever, he turned around very slowly and started dancing.
My mum and my dad kicked me out, that's why. Oh good. Let's go home, I guess. Done.
Why'd we even show up?
My dad is out for a week and a half. Nice. What does he do? He's a drug smuggler. Nice. Here we are. This is your house? Yep. Me and my dad. Nice. I know. We'll show you around.
Dude.
This is my room. The lounge room where my dad sleeps.
Ridiculous.
My aunt. My aunt's friends. My pup and then that was me when I was young, and my aunt's boyfriend.
Whoa.
My aunt's sister, and my stepsister. I very see her, I very see her. She's living in New York City now, going to college.
What?
So this is the storage.
D-Dad.
This is the spare room. So if you want, you know,
Dude.
you can stay in here. It's up to you.
Whoa.
And yeah, this is the bathroom. Nice. Okay, good night. Good night. Hey, it's time to get up. Yeah, what's up? I'm up. Good, let's go. Done. Thanks for waking me up. You're welcome. Okay, let's go. Done. Get in. Let's go to school. I'm gonna have a joint, okay? That's okay.
Dude.
Make up your mind. Cool, that way? Yeah. Okay, cool.
Walking away. Just like that, not wanting to turn back to him again, I just watched him go until he was enough away to almost be out of sight. And then I realized something. He wasn't moving away anymore, nor was he dancing. I watched in horror as the distant shape of him grew larger and larger, and this time he was running straight towards me. I ran until I was off the side road and back into a better lit row of sparse traffic. Looking behind me then, he was nowhere to be found. The rest of the way home, I kept glancing over my shoulder, always expecting to see his terrifying smile, but he was never there. I lived in that city for 6 more months after that night, and I never went out for another walk. There was something about his face that always haunted me. He didn't look drunk. He didn't look high. He looked completely and utterly insane. And that's a very, very scary thing to see.
Oh, just fucking shoot them. Like this.
It was the
How-
weekend on Saturday
how-
evening. Kayla's
how-
parents had to go to England for a meeting, so they told her to stay home by herself. But before they left, they installed a good security system in the house. At around 5:30 p.m. the next day, she received an email from her dad saying that he had transferred money to the bank and wanted Kayla to withdraw it. She sighed in frustration, but had to go to the ATM before it got dark because it could be dangerous. She started off walking the usual 5-minute distance and arrived at the ATM. She noticed a man leaning on the light post to the right of it. He was facing down and was completely shirtless with long black trousers on. Kayla was confused and many questions were running in her head. Why is he looking down and why is he shirtless on a cold November's evening? She quickly withdrew the cash and got out immediately. Kayla turned around to see if the man was still standing there, but he was gone. She sighed in relief, thinking that he had already left. She turned her head and suddenly the man was standing in front of her. Kayla nearly screamed in terror with her heart pounding faster than it ever has, and he was staring at her with soulless cold eyes and a creepy smile on his face. She dared not to open her mouth to ask what was wrong with him. Instead, Kayla took that opportunity to run as fast as she could and pass him by. She ran a good distance away and glanced over her shoulder to see if he was following her. But for some reason, he didn't move from that spot. In less than 3 minutes, she reached her house. Kayla then checked her security cameras to see if that man followed her home, and luckily, he didn't. Feeling paranoid, she decided to sleep on the couch that night near the recording TV. The next morning, Kayla woke up early to go for a run at a nearby park. She was walking into the deeper area of the park where there were no people ahead of her. but then she noticed that somebody was following her. She just thought it might be a regular person walking in the park, so she plugged in her earphones, turned on the music, and continued running. A few seconds later, she felt the ground vibrate with heavy steps of a man. Then suddenly the man wrapped his arms around Kayla's waist. Kayla screamed and he remained silent and let go of his left arm from her waist and covered her mouth. She bit his hand until his skin broke and bled. He was screaming in agonizing pain, but was not so foolish to free her from his locked right arm. She immediately turned around to face him, and that's when she saw that it was the same guy from yesterday at the ATM. He lowered his face closer to Kayla and said, "I've never seen such a beautiful girl like you from my whole neighborhood." Kayla was so freaked out and panicked, trying to resist, but the guy wouldn't let go of her. By some miracle, 2 security guards approached him from behind and knocked him down to his feet, handcuffed him, and took him to the police. Kayla asked the security guards how they knew she was in danger. He said that the security team fixed hidden cameras on trees and light posts for visitor safety 3 days ago after there were reports that young teenage girls go missing in this park. Kayla thanked the security guard after saving her life, and he told her not to travel places anymore without an adult. After 15 minutes, the police arrived at the scene and they asked Kayla for details and how it all started. Kayla then called her dad and told him about the incident. The police gave her a ride home and said they would give her an update on the situation. She thanked them for the help and left. 2 days passed. Kayla got a call from the police and they said that they collected all the information and details about the man. He fled from his country and admitted to many felonies and will be sent back to receive his punishments and the death sentence. It was 6:40 a.m. on a school day and I was on the stop waiting for my bus to arrive. I've always been a cautious person and I constantly looked around. As I turned to my left, I see a man. I was kind of creeped out because of how tall he was and I couldn't see his face. However, it was probably just another guy waiting for the bus, so I shrugged it off. I looked again and he was standing still. This confused me as I